Welcome to Sex, Lies, and the Truth, a podcast devoted to the stories of people discovering biological family they didn't know about, digging for the truth, and learning who they really are. I'm Jody Klugman-Rabb, a licensed marriage and family therapist with my own DNA story.
My name is Christina Fitzgibbons. I'm a genetic and investigative genealogist.
So this morning on the podcast, Christina and I are welcoming Karen. Karen is a recent NPE. She's going to talk to us today about her discovery. And the discovery is some very special new family members. We're going to actually talk to a few of them a little bit later in the podcast. But to start with, welcome, Karen. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'm kind of excited. I don't know anything about your story, so I'm actually hearing all of it for the first time. So I might poke in and ask some clarifying questions, if you don't mind, but I'm assuming if I have them, other people will as well. So go for it.
Good. That would be great because it's kind of a complicated story. So in October of 2018, I went to Florida to visit my mother and stepfather. My mother's 80th birthday was approaching. So I asked her what she'd like to do for her 80th and asked her if she'd like to take a trip. And she said she would. Asked her where she'd like to go. And after thinking it over, she thought, well, I'm Scotch-Irish, so maybe Scotland or Ireland. I researched it. As the holidays were approaching, I decided to buy the 23andMe kits for Christmas gifts, one for my mother, one for myself, one for my daughter. And we were leaving for vacation in Europe in the middle of December, so I decided to mail mine off before we left for vacation. While we were away, I got the email that says your 23andMe results are ready.
Oh, that was quick.
Yeah, you really did beat the rush.
Yeah.
I was just on a train in Italy on my iPhone, and I logged in with 23andMe and thought, well, it's going to be Scotland or Ireland, and my husband and my daughter and her boyfriend were with us. It says you're 49% Ashkenazi Jewish.
Wow.
Well, welcome to the tribe on behalf of the rest of us.
Thank
Which
Thank
tribe?
And so I was very shocked because as far as I knew, both of my parents were Scotch-Irish. So I showed it to my husband, who was Jewish. And
wow, what did he think? Was he like, I had no idea I'd married a Jewish lady?
He became very wide-eyed, and I said, do you think it could be a mistake? My daughter was shocked. Everybody became very quiet for the rest of the train ride. We're all kind of thinking. I was sitting there for several hours thinking. My parents divorced when I was 5. When I was around 20, my father told me that my mother had had several affairs. And that one of them, he said she even had one with a Jewish man. She thought he was going to leave his wife for her, but he didn't.
Wow.
And I thought, why does it matter that he's Jewish? And why are you telling me this? And I didn't ask any questions because I really didn't want to know. I thought what happened between them is between them. But the fact that he mentioned that one of them was Jewish was something that stood out in my mind.
Right.
If he hadn't said that, I might not have remembered it.
Yeah.
So when I remember that conversation, I'm just, the wheels start turning. And then I log back in to see if the results had changed in any way. And I see this button, connect with your DNA relatives. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe somebody in my family has done this test, and I'll see if it's likely that it's accurate or likely that it's an error. And I clicked on that button. It listed a man's name, Sean, who I shared less than 25% DNA with, and it said that he was predicted to be my half-brother.
Whoa.
I showed that to my husband, and he was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
So the same day that you found out you were Jewish, you're also finding family that you hadn't ever known of before.
Correct.
Very close family.
That's a lot to happen on one day.
Yes, on vacation.
On a train ride.
So my family and I, we agreed we were going to try our best to table it until we got home, not let it ruin our vacation, though
Good
it was
plan.
hard.
How'd that work out for you?
We talked about it a little bit, but for the most part, we were able to stay busy and not let it, interfere too much. When I got home on Christmas Eve, probably 2 days after Christmas, I started Googling my potential half-brother's name to see if I could find anything on Facebook or LinkedIn or...
Nothing like internet stalking new family. There you go.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask a question, just because this
Sure.
is, I do the stalking as well. Did he have a name that seemed more Sean O'Connell or Sean Goldstein?
More like the Goldstein.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. It wasn't Goldstein, I'm assuming. I just totally
No.
made that up.
No. That's just an example.
So you started Googling.
I didn't find anything on LinkedIn or Facebook that seems like it would be a match. And so I was looking for email addresses, and somehow I came across 3 or 4 email addresses. I knew it was going to be very difficult to get information from my mother. It was not my first
You didn't go to her
inclination.
first.
No, did
And
not.
that's a great idea in general, because as Jody knows, and a lot of listeners, all 12 of them, you can sometimes get thrown off the trail, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. So it's best to go by DNA and your own hunch.
So I sat down and I drafted an email. Once I drafted it, I thought about all of the potential outcomes. I could get no response. I could get an unkind response. I could get a nice response. I went through all of that in my mind. And then my husband came home from work, and I asked him to read the email. And he asked me, he said, "Why don't you sleep on it and send it in the morning?" Needless to say, as soon as he went to bed, I sent it.
Oh,
How long later? A few months? A few
no,
minutes?
A few minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I get it, because once you get this ball rolling, nothing can happen fast enough.
Right.
So I sent the email. I watched TV for a while. I poured myself a glass of wine. About an hour later, I received a response.
Wow.
Yeah. The first word of the email was fascinating.
Well, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
He had been told that he may have a half-sister out there.
Ah, he was primed for this already. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
He had been told
But
by his father or his mother?
His father, approximately 20 years ago.
Ooh.
Amazing.
So he was simultaneously communicating with them that I had contacted him to confirm what the family knew, because it wasn't fresh in his mind, because it's been 20 years since they were told. So we emailed back and forth for hours.
And you were located in what state?
I'm on the East Coast,
Okay.
And
And
he is?
he lives on the West Coast.
West Coast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the D.C. area. Probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I went and woke my husband up. Told him,
Jonathan.
yeah, that we've been communicating and, back and forth. And so he got up and he read all the emails, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing."
It is amazing. First of all, hats off to Sean for responding. That's amazing. That's
exactly what we want to hear.
in the initial sort of reaction. The reaction is, I have to email this person back, not delete the email, pretend it didn't happen. So I'm impressed by that.
Well, and Sean has 2 brothers, so I have 3 new brothers.
That's amazing. Okay, so tell me about what you've learned about your birth father.
He was deceased
Mm-hmm.
about 6 years ago, and he and their mother was divorced, and his father had been married twice subsequently.
And during the time of your conception, was he married to Sean's mother, the wife he was going to maybe leave for your mother?
Yes,
Okay, so it was an affair, or they separated, or it was an unknown.
it was an affair. My mother was married
Mhm.
to my father,
Mhm.
and she had my brother, who's 9 years older than me, brother who I grew up with.
Mhm.
So my mother had a 9-year-old, and then she had the affair and had me. And then 3 years later, she had my sister with the man she was married to.
The man she was married to that was not the
That
father
was-
that was...
Your birth certificate father.
Okay.
His father, my birth certificate father.
Okay. How did your mother and your biological father, your father, meet each other at work?
She worked at a bank, and he was a customer.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised. I thought he
I
was
like
going to
it.
be your boss. Okay.
I like it.
I like that too. He did
Yeah.
more than give a bank deposit.
Oh my
I'm
God.
sorry, I had to. I had to. I mean, you said it. You set it right up for me. Wow. He was probably putting in some very, like he was coming in all the time, We'll have a banner underneath your blog. It had like Bank of America rolling through or wherever it was they were.
Sponsored by.
Sponsored by. That's amazing. Sorry. I ask these questions and I make these comments because sometimes the stuff is so heavy, and people say this about my bedside manner. Sometimes it's so heavy that there's just nothing you can say other than wow. Like, wow.
You have to have some levity.
You really do, because you could have had a very different response from Sean.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Absolutely.
I've had them. I've seen them with
We've
people.
heard them on
We've
this
heard them
podcast.
all. It's why I tell people all the time, it's don't even listen to another story until you have your own, because you will really experience it differently. Nothing will play out the same. So Sean and the two brothers, were those two brothers also with the same mother? They were full siblings to him?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
And so the brother and sister that I grew up with thinking were my full brothers are actually,
Half.
full brother and sister are actually my half.
You have no full siblings at this point.
Correct. I'm an only child.
Oh.
An only full child. Wow. Isn't that crazy, though?
Kind of blew my mind a little bit because I grew up an only child and became a sibling. You started out a sibling and
Became a half sibling.
reversed into an only child. Okay, that's
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So, so your stepfather, who raised you and you believed was your father. That's the way I guess I can term
birth
it.
certificate.
Birth
father.
certificate father. Is that what we say in your world?
Yes, in the NPE.
I say
world.
I also had a stepfather.
Okay. That's
Oh.
right. That's true. Okay.
So we gotta,
So
for
the
technicality's sake,
or the-
separate them.
Yeah. Okay. So the faux father, was he alive when you found this news?
My birth certificate father was a wonderful father. I don't think he knew. My mother told me that he did not know that I was not his child.
Okay.
And I always thought that I was his favorite. I mean, he may have treated all of us that way.
It's amazing. That's actually so great to hear.
Yeah, touching.
Will you remind me when you found what year it was that you found all of this?
A few months ago, December 2018.
Okay.
It's fresh.
It's interesting that he mentioned to you 20 years ago that
Correct.
she had affairs and one was Jewish, because
He may have known.
it sounds to me like he really did, but it also sounds to me like he was dedicated to being your father.
It didn't matter.
It didn't matter to him. You don't just sort of throw that out. I mean, I think
No.
everybody listening is like, oh, he totally knew. I think it's pretty great that he felt that you should know that information.
Well, what happened when you did tell Mom finally?
Well, I told Mom that I got my 23andMe results back, which she was very interested in because we were planning this trip. And I said, Mom, my 23andMe says that I'm 49% Ashkenazi Jewish. And I had to look up what Ashkenazi Jewish meant because I wasn't familiar with the term.
Yes, okay.
So she said, kind of in a disgusted way, I guess anything's possible nowadays.
What does that mean?
Okay, I'm going to
I
have a
said-
conversation with your mom
Wait, she said, I believe anything's possible these days.
these days.
As it with regard to,
It was a flippant way of dismissing the content.
okay, I thought she was saying like the results,
She was dismissing him.
meaning they were wrong. That's what I was saying.
Probably.
She didn't
didn't
like
like
the
it.
results. Well, clearly, when you told her, her response is,
She knew.
yeah, I mean, she knew.
So I told her that there's this connect with DNA relatives button and that there was someone listed and they suggested that that was a half brother. She was very quiet. the first conversation, we got nowhere. So I hung up disappointed, but I didn't expect anything different.
Right, you didn't, so it wasn't a surprise. But
Right.
did she say anything? Like, did she give up anything, or was she just like, I don't know?
No, nothing. And then I waited about a week, and I had been in touch with one or both of the other new brothers at this point, and they had sent me pictures of my biological father. They had given me all kinds of information.
That's great.
Wow.
After about a week, I went back with her, and they knew some information about the nature or location of the relationship between my mother and their father.
They knew, they had heard rumblings from their father that there was or could be a half-sibling sister out there.
I believe he told them that they had a half-sister out there.
Oh,
So
it was definitive in the
He
in their
knew,
family.
and she, clearly it was at a time when he knew it was a female, meaning that you had been born already.
He had
Right.
probably had some access to you. Or at least he was just on very good terms with the teller at the bank, and she told him what the gender of her new baby was. Right?
Right.
Well, she was on maternity leave. All the new tellers were like
Yeah.
ratting her out. Wow. Okay.
What's it
Okay.
like now with Mom? Has she come cleaner at all since then?
Yes. Second call with her, I told her that I'd been in touch with Sean, and I told her that I had pictures, that Sean's father's name was Charlie, and she said, doesn't ring a bell.
Oh,
She said,
Mom.
do
Well,
you
Charlie's
want
a pretty
me to-
common name. Okay.
you want me to look at the pictures? And I said, sure, if you want to look at the pictures, I can send them to you. And that's when I knew, because I thought, why would she want to look at the pictures if there's nothing to this?
Yep.
I'm also curious if was she still sticking to the original story of birth certificate dad?
It wasn't really no story. No
Okay.
story.
She just didn't know what to say.
Now, I gotta say, from, again, looking at it from all of these different sides, that's a situation where you've been holding on to a story and a lie for so long. I think it would be very hard to figure out how to manage that.
Right.
And how to, because she probably was like, I just want to fess up and be done with this. But how?
Or I just assumed that I was never going to have to deal with this.
Yeah, how do you?
And now how do I come
Yeah,
clean after all these years?
Yeah.
So how did she?
This is a 49-year-old secret.
And back then, it was a secret that everybody would have understood. But now, in today's world, we get it. People have affairs. People have premarital sex. We're okay with that. Like, we're good.
Yeah, the standards are really different.
Yeah, we've lowered our standards. We aren't quite as judgmental as we were 49 years ago with this stuff.
Right. She said, are you going to mail the pictures or are you going to email the pictures? And I said, well, I can email them if you want me to. And she said, okay, I'll go to my computer.
Oh.
So that's also, I was like, okay. And she said, I don't know, Karen. It looks a little bit familiar, but I just don't know. And I said, okay. I said, well, think about it. And if anything comes to mind, let me know.
Where you're like, I
already know.
You already know you had sex with him. Now, maybe she didn't really like.
She put a toe in the water. I'll give her that. It looks a little familiar, but I don't know.
There could have been a lot of Charlies there at the
having
bank.
done so many of these interviews, either for the podcast or as clients and in the NPE group on Facebook, what I understand is that the moms are so ensconced in these stories that they created for themselves that unraveling them is so unsafe and threatening. So
Absolutely.
they have to go in very slowly or they completely reject it altogether. And it sounds like she tried a little bit.
Right.
Good for her.
So I waited another week. I decided to send her an email. And it was a very, heartfelt email. I told her about some of the things that I'd learned from Sean. And I told her that I'd been divorced and I know how terrible it can be to be in a, unhappy marriage. I'm not looking to judge you. I just want to know my story. That's all I want.
Well said.
Very well said.
And 2 days later, she wrote back and said she'd tell me the whole story.
Good for her.
Wow. Did your mother know that your birth certificate father had said to you 20 years ago this information, like she had affairs and,
She did not know that. I told her in the email, but I softened it
Got it. Okay.
So what did you learn from Mom when she came clean that you didn't already know?
I'm not sure she told me anything I didn't know. Honestly, the brothers were so open
Okay.
and forthcoming in describing their father and his personality and the type of person he was. What she said was very consistent, almost
Fantastic.
exactly the way they described him.
Well, that's the best of both worlds. You just got everything corroborated.
Did
Right.
your siblings that you grew up with, believing were full siblings, did they run out and do a DNA test, wondering if their father was their father? And was it?
They don't know yet.
They don't know anything.
Oh,
They don't know anything.
I wish we had little clips of like cliffhanger music and stuff that we
We
could
will.
play.
We'll add that in. Dun, dun,
That would be
dun.
awesome.
Could you
Yeah.
imagine if they? Oh man, I'm impressed by these new brothers of yours who are being so forthcoming. They gave you such a huge gift
Yeah.
of this.
Absolutely.
So, Karen, before we go into contacting Sean, can you explain what your relationship was like with your two siblings that you grew up with?
Well, growing up, when my parents divorced, my brother stayed with my father, and my sister and I went with my mother. My mother, when she left, she worked several jobs to make ends meet. She was very difficult. She disciplined my sister and I very differently. She was much harsher on me. And then I didn't see my brother very often. When we would go over to visit my father, he was a teenager, so he was never home. Probably when he was about college age, he started communicating with us a little bit. Probably describe our relationship as fairly normal until my father passed away. And then the, I guess, stress of his sudden passing and handling his estate is what damaged the relationship.
Right.
Oh,
Are we talking to Sean today?
we are going to
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm also going to be finding out if Sean is also the Sean I'm looking for from Washington, D.C., who has another half brother. I'm not kidding.
Did you already have a client like this?
I'm working on it right now. I just pulled it up. Literally. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
It can't be. But
It-
it's just
well-
funny when you said Sean and I said,
I think it's spelled different.
this one also spells it that way.
Oh.
Are there any twins in your family?
Not that I'm aware of. But
On
clearly,
other-
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, what we think we know is completely irrelevant.
Yes.
This Sean also is on the West Coast. It's like literally. Woo, woo, woo.
Well,
It's
as
probably
our,
not, but
as our previous guest, Sky Nelson Isaacs, would explain it, synchronicity is no accident.
that would be crazy.
Yeah.
That's right. That was fascinating. John,
Yes.
I have Jody and Christina on the
Hi,
line
Sean.
here.
On the line. Hi, Sean.
Hello.
We've been talking to your new sister, hearing sort of the backstory, and we're pretty amazed. And out of the gate, I'm going to tell you, I'm very impressed with you already. I'm thanking you from a lot of people for your willingness to communicate and be so open here today, and with your sister when she contacted you.
Just seemed like the right thing to do.
It is the right thing to do.
Yes. Congratulations.
Yes. Probably the first question I have is when maybe you can tell us about when you received the email from Karen and your reaction and what you did.
Sure. So I was driving, stopping at a light, looking at my phone. Obviously that's mistake number one.
Well, you know what?
We weren't gonna say
We're
anything.
Yeah, you know what? You must have had. You never ever do that. You didn't do it before. You're never going
Right.
to do
Well,
it
there's
again.
something about transportation already in this family because she's on a train discovering it the first time, and now
And
he's
you're in
the
traffic.
car. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you.
So then I see what 23andMe, and I'm a minute from home, so I get home and I stop in the driveway and I read this. And I'm like, huh. Like, I'm in technology, have been for a long time. So first I'm thinking this is some kind of scam. And I'm thinking, well, it's like pretty hard to hack DNA in 23andMe. So I think it's not beyond the capacity of my father. So, all right, let me go. And then let me go to 23 and check and see, verify this. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. This is really quite fascinating. To me, at that moment, amusing and interesting, and I'm obviously thinking about myself and my father and the repercussions. But then, as I continue to process it, I'm thinking about this woman who wrote me a letter and, like, how her life is completely turned upside down. Like, if she, she's 50, she just found out her father's not her father. She's probably asking, did her father know? My mother lied to me. What else did she lie to me about my whole life? Like, what's my family history? What's my DNA,
Right.
history? What's my health history?
Right.
So I'm in marketing, so empathy is a big part of what I do. And after I got through my own process, I started to empathize with Karen's and tried to be an excellent person and answer as many questions as I could.
Okay, you're the youngest of 3 boys, but older than Karen. Okay.
That is correct, yeah.
Got it.
I thought about the questions she would ask, and I thought about questions that might be uncomfortable for her to even ask. So I tried to answer and jump into those questions, even before she asked them. Like, I was thinking, wow, if I didn't know who my father was, I wonder if he was, like, rich. And,
Oh my gosh, or
I
famous.
missed out on anything there. Early on, I was like, he died penniless. I would want to know, like, what was the situation? Like, what was the life I potentially missed out on
Right.
Right.
that I didn't have?
Right.
And I was like, you didn't miss out on much. I wanted to get to that part first.
Well, it's funny because maybe, again,
Some people do miss out.
they do,
Yeah.
and they miss out on siblings. That's
So
a big
clearly she
thing.
missed out on you.
Yeah, she missed out on her siblings. That's kind of a big deal. That's almost, for a lot of people, a bigger deal.
A bigger deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as the father aspect of it, like, I didn't know what, like, we all have issues with our parents and nobody's perfect, and the generations that preceded us were hindered by their ability to express their emotions and what it meant to be a man and all those things. So, there's societal as well as genetic issues.
Right.
I don't really I personally don't blame anything,
Right.
anyone or anything,
Right.
The
Different time.
idea of being a victim
Right, of
has
course.
been a thing
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Now, Karen had mentioned that you all knew about her before she even contacted you.
Well, I didn't really, if I heard about it, I wasn't as privy to that information. I just probably wasn't in the conversation or wasn't talking to my brother, my oldest brother, who was working with my father and knew about it at the time.
Was he going to the bank
maybe
with
I heard about
maybe
it.
he was going to the bank with your dad and was like, boy, Dad sure goes to the bank a lot and she's really flirting with this lady.
But my younger brother, believes that he sort of had a moment when he was like part of an affair when he was a little kid.
Ooh.
But my oldest brother worked with my father, as adults,
Right.
and the discussion came up. Even if you hear that, it's like, all right, yeah, sure. Like, a couple decades ago, he had an affair, might have had a kid.
Right.
It just was so inconsequential. But
Right.
when you get an email,
Yeah.
it gets real pretty quick.
It does.
So the interesting thing, my goal going into this is really to do something. Well, I was amused by the story, and I was like, oh, this is definitely more interesting than what's on Netflix. So I'm gonna go with this for a while. But as it came along, we have real human beings involved. It was more about doing a mitzvah, doing something for somebody
Right.
who's going through this process, and that was really kind of most of the goal, to help and answer the questions that I would have.
Right.
And what was great about that is that it initiated deeper communication amongst my brothers. We're siblings, we're adults.
Right.
One's in Washington, D.C.,
Okay.
and 2 of us are on the West Coast. So,
Okay.
what was really a great experience for us was just have recapitulate childhood and our father and our family history, and in order to communicate that to Karen,
Right.
and just to have a moment to be closer amongst, the siblings I grew up with. That was a pretty positive experience that came from
Right.
this 23andMe moment.
Is your mother alive?
My mother's alive,
Okay.
and she was aware. She knew. My
Yeah.
brother Scott spoke to her a little bit more about it, and that how, kind of what a jerk my father was at
Right.
that time. I don't fault a human being for, a guy or anybody for infidelity. If we,
Right.
if we taxed infidelity, we would get rid of the national debt in about a month.
Ain't that the truth?
I don't think it'd take a month.
So I don't blame that. It's more just how people deal with things, and just everything else in their life that's around that really frame the situation. So out of that, we sort of saw that my father was not the stand-up guy that we assumed, not the stand-up guy that we assumed he was not.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
just more confirmation.
More clarity
and,
for that, for sure. Yeah. Was she able to add anything that you didn't know previously? Clearly not just about her, but, did she open up a little bit about what she knew and...
Nothing about the relationship with Karen's mother, but more about what her life was like, being a woman in the late 60s, early
Sure.
70s, who was not now has a, cheating husband who, had a child, and she doesn't have a job and can't even probably open a bank account in her name, and has 3 kids, and she's
Right.
not unhappy, and she's stuck in basically, a long-term plan to divorce my father and get out of the situation
Right.
that took place over the next, let's say, 7 or 8 years.
Right.
And another great thing, any reason to communicate with the people you love on a deeper level is a great thing.
Well, it's very impressive on our end because we're hearing that you are open to having more connections and more family. We've come across several examples in our interviews and people that we've talked with over the course of the last couple of years whose bio family or even known family don't feel like they have that openness and really aren't receptive to new family for a variety of reasons. And sometimes it's because they're suspicious. What do you want from us? And it's kind of a competition for resources more than it is anything else. But it's so nice to hear that you guys had no expectation of ulterior motives. You came at it from a purely empathic and place of integrity, really.
Yeah, I was thinking those people who are not open to sharing are probably the same people who order individually at Chinese restaurants,
Or they don't do
Sure.
family style. When people are adopted, there's a legal situation, right? There is a legal termination, different than Karen's where there wasn't. It was, he's still the father. He was, maybe state by state, he's legally not considered the father because it took place during a marriage to somebody else. But, when there's an adoption, there's no legal right to any inheritance. And so I think that's 49 states, maybe 50 by now. So I always sort of out of the gate tell people to tell the new family that you're reaching out to, just so you know I don't get anything. I already know that. I can't get anything. So,
Right.
And nor do I
your
want it.
part of
Yeah.
the trust is still
Yeah.
yours. I'm not getting anything. Because strangely, people do, sort of get amped up about that stuff. And then it also removes the intention that these people have from the whole conversation.
Let me just add one more thing that was kind of
Yes.
interesting.
Yes, please do.
So the first thing, Karen may have shared this, is that, is this person someone I even want to talk to? Like, I'll help them through this process, but do I really, are they someone I'm interested in having a further relationship with? And so we checked our political affiliations
Oh my gosh.
to make sure
Yes.
there wasn't a big disconnect there. That worked out. We got through that. And then, I was talking to my friends about this because it's a pretty amusing story. And, they're like, oh, man, you're opening up Pandora's box. Like, what if you don't like this person? What if they're a weirdo? I'm like, you mean like
Then they're half of my DNA.
people
That's a
in my
bad thing.
family? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I was like, well, if I don't like them, I'll just treat them like they're a family member, and I won't talk to them.
like everybody does in their family. Like
Right.
clearly people connect and not connect
Yeah.
with people in their families. So that's actually
That's
pretty
hilarious.
So I thought that
So let me make sure that I
kind of
have
a
all
funny
the
concern.
connections made, because I came to know Karen through Rob, who is the friend of mine. So how are you related to Rob, Sean?
Rob is my first cousin. My father, Karen's father,
Mm-hmm.
and his sister is Rob's mother.
Your father and Rob's mother are
Our siblings.
are full siblings or half siblings.
Well, we'll
Right.
assume full.
Right.
Well,
We
Full
know
siblings
how
is far-
you feel about it, Christina.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody is 100% related to each other anymore.
hey, I'll tell you, it's it's I just like to make sure that I have the whole thing mapped out in my head.
It was like one of the first things you said to me when I hired you was, "Are you sure that your dad and his sister are full siblings?" And I'm like, even if they're not, I can't possibly fathom that. It's just too much.
Hey, you know what?
I know.
I do DNA, so I
Crazy.
look at numbers, and so I need those are things that are important to me. Now, the other thing I was going to note too is when you log into 23andMe, it says the possibilities for what the relationship could be. So Karen looked at it and it said half brother. It also may have said uncle,
Or first cousin. Yeah.
not first cousin.
Right.
No, it is because there's a few different possibilities. Generally, you can look at people's age and figure out that it's probably not an uncle. But
It only
it's-
listed one possibility for me. It didn't list any others.
Yeah.
What about on your side?
Yeah. Same here.
Oh, fascinating.
On my side, it said half.
You know what that could be
it
is
said-
because
High enough centimorgans.
no, that's the same. It's the same for both relationships. I bet it has to do with Sean does not share an ex with her, so it can only be a paternal thing. Because that's what it is. I bet that's what it is. Ooh,
And
that
and
opens
now
the
our
door.
listeners know why we have Christina on the podcast.
Well,
There
I'm
she
working.
goes
I'm
right
working
there.
it through in my head right now. Sean, I do want to say to you that I have another client who's local to me here in Marin, who I'm helping right now. He's was born a twin in D.C. and I logged into 23andMe, and his top match is a man named Sean, who is his half brother or uncle. And I died laughing because I go, could you imagine if I was calling that Sean right now?
Right.
And saying, guess what? You have even more. It's not, but
I don't think that we have a
it's
connection
not.
here,
He's
do we?
not Ashkenazi. I'm looking for the Sean who is the Irish Catholic Sean. But it was DC, and
a
I was
lot of
like, there's no
similarities.
way.
Yeah. Nothing is for certain anymore.
Nothing
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. We've been moving from a podcast to a mini series of that connection.
Well,
Nice.
we'll talk about that later.
Well, Sean, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being a part of our podcast, but also a part of Karen's life. It's really nice to hear.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Let's patch in your cousin Kathy.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Kathy. I have Jody and Christina here.
Hi,
Hi,
Kathy.
how are you?
We've been hearing all the family secrets about your family.
Yeah, we know
yeah.
everything.
we got the whole backstory from Karen, and we just spoke with Sean and heard more from him and his father. And so your mother is a sister of Sean's father and Karen's father.
Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Great.
So maybe you could share with us and our listeners what it was like for you to discover Karen and how you did. Who contacted whom?
Well, Karen's brother, Scott, who's the oldest, emailed me and said, can you call me? And told me a little bit about the story of how Karen connected with Sean. I wasn't necessarily surprised. Weird. I mean, I knew my uncle really well. I knew his reputation. I wasn't surprised, but I was a little shocked. You know what I mean? It takes you sort of out of yourself, but
for sure.
I wasn't really.
And it sounds
Wasn't
to
really
me
surprised.
like Karen's dad was living rather authentically. If everybody understood his reputation and knew him to be this kind of man, he was pretty authentic with himself.
I don't think he was authentic with himself. I wouldn't describe him that way.
Okay, how would you describe him?
Let's see. I think he was very talented, very brilliant, and very self-destructive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he could have had it all, but he was a little bit self-destructive. Yeah.
Was he close to your mother?
Yes. They were very close growing up and, through their lives together, not in their later years. And we grew up as a pretty close family.
Right. And you were close with him.
Very close with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably the only person that was close with him.
I was going to say, you
Really
probably were closer to him than his children.
He was able to show overt love to girls, and I was his closest girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he had no daughters that were
Right.
part of his life.
Right.
So, what is
So,
your relationship with
absolutely.
Karen like now?
Oh, well, I'm thrilled because I had 3 first cousins that were boys before.
Right.
I feel pretty fortunate
That's
that
great.
if there was going to be somebody, coming in, that it would be somebody intelligent and beautiful and relaxed and
Your style.
a good fit for
Yeah,
our
a good
family.
fit, right.
Mhm.
Oh, you guys hit the jackpot
I know, you did. Well, Karen, I'm seriously.
on
Yeah,
both
pretty lucky.
directions.
You
Yeah.
really did. But some people, they kind of get some abuse.
Oh,
back,
yeah, I'm sure that right. Yeah, I've heard stories like that. And I have friends that have reached out when they, that are adopted and do that kind of thing. And then,
Right.
they're not well received.
Right. It could go any possible way. So you said you're thrilled. Does that mean that you guys have a good and positive relationship together?
Yeah, well, yes, we're just getting to know one another, so we know one another some. It's interesting because you can feel like family, but really only know one another superficially, which is
Right.
the stage that we're at.
Right,
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, it's only been a few months.
Are you, where are you located
Yeah.
at?
What side?
I
of
live
the
in
country?
LA.
Have you guys met yet?
Yes.
Tell us about
Ooh,
that.
I didn't know this.
We met Sean and Neil, Karen's other brothers, had a dinner for family, and we came, my husband, my daughter, and I, and Karen and her daughter were there, and the kids. So we had an introduction.
Wow.
It was great. It was easy.
You met a lot of
it
people
might not
at
have been
once.
easy for Karen. It was easy for us.
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
What did it feel like for you, Karen?
Actually, I thought that I was going to be nervous. I thought all of these things. It was shockingly easy. I flew to California and I was there for a tennis tournament, and I drove up to LA to meet Sean and Neil and Kathy, and Sean invited me to stay at his home. So he had a dinner one night and invited everyone and their children, their spouses, and it was just, Kathy brought all of these photo albums that had pictures of my biological father, Charlie, and the grandparents, and it was just amazing.
Wow, it sounds
It was
fascinating.
Really, really easy.
Yeah,
Well,
it felt
that
easy,
makes sense,
right?
right?
That night?
Yeah.
My uncle probably, I don't know. Karen told me that he reached out, to her mom when she was very young.
Mhm.
Probably would have wanted a relationship. Probably. So there wasn't really anything negative. I mean, they had a relationship.
Right.
She became pregnant.
Right.
It was obvious that it couldn't move forward, especially in that day and age.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't anything really negative that Charlie did as a birth father or to.
Right. I actually don't think we even heard that part about him having
Reached out.
reached
no.
out. So he had reached out to
Karen's mom.
Karen's mom.
I asked my mother if they were in touch after I was born, and she said there were a few phone calls, nothing of any significance, and then she said when I was about 5, they met for dinner. She said that he wanted to meet me, but she didn't think that was a good idea, so she said she showed him a picture of me, and she said that he offered her a piano for me, but we lived in a, third floor walk-up
And it
with
would
no
be
room
very
for a
hard to-
piano and no
yeah.
money for lessons.
Oh my.
So
Was
she
he a
declined the
pianist?
piano. No.
Oh,
His mother was an opera singer, and there was a great appreciation for music in the family.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Um,
then. Wow.
Yes, but that was the last time my mother says that they communicated anyway.
What was that like for you to hear all of that?
It was shocking. I asked her if she'd ever considered telling me the truth, and she said no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she also wanted you to send her pictures of Charlie, who clearly,
Was the one who maybe got away.
well, or she,
Maybe.
well, no, I meant like that she had dinner with him 5 years later and there was a conversation about meeting you. It's like, how could you forget who this is? There can't be
Yes.
that many Charlies. Yeah, she wasn't quite ready to give all that up. But that's also upsetting to me personally, to have the mother make the decision about whether or not you're going to know who your biological
Yeah,
father is.
That was upsetting to me. Yeah.
It is.
She doesn't own the information anymore.
That's the point of the road where you go one way or the other, and she went the other way. As a child whose mother did something similar, I never forgot that. I'm like, that's my person.
It's my life. So I think I did hear, Karen, you describe earlier your dad was a great dad. You felt very close to him. I don't get the sense from you that you feel like you missed out on something. Am I correct?
No, the information that all three brothers provided made me feel that I didn't miss out on something, but I still would have liked to have met Charlie.
For sure.
Besides that, of course. Yeah.
It was hard to learn that he'd only passed about 6 years ago.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
relatively speaking, it was soon.
Yeah, and Kathy's mother had only passed about 3 years ago. It was, kind of like a sad that it was so recent.
That's too bad.
So what is the plan going forward? How are you guys going to continue a relationship? What will that look like, do you think?
We're getting to know one another and we enjoy one another. So I think we're compelled to, continue.
That's great.
We're going to check back in a year and you guys are going to be like, all right, so we hit some bumps in the road. We had this family reunion and Kathy got really drunk.
No.
And then, just kidding.
No, I think that she found 3 pretty reasonable brothers, and our family is pretty low-key, and because it wasn't a surprise and nobody's really so overwhelmingly hurt,
Yes.
I think that there's not a lot of negative.
That's fantastic.
The only one who was really hurt, who is still alive, is the boy's mother,
Oh,
and she's not hurt because they divorced, and he wasn't her problem for a very long time, although this probably happened, I'm sure it happened
yeah.
during their marriage.
During their
She's
marriage.
really the only one.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a good point.
Probably the introduction of Karen to my aunt is not a good idea, but
So I'm curious what both of you would say as advice to our listeners on both ends. So Karen, from your perspective as the NPE discovering all of this, being the child, and Kathy, from your end, being the family that's contacted, if you could give one piece of advice, what would it be?
My advice, I would say, when I sat down to write the email, I tried to have no expectation. Be open to whatever happened and to not take it personally.
That's perfect. Kathy?
good advice. And I would say from the family point of view, to just be open to listening, because obviously somebody's reaching out because there's history, confusion, and pain. And I never think that anybody's out to get me.
Good.
Now, so I would say just be open to listening and not feel threatened, because there's no threat.
There's no threat.
That's a perfect message.
Thank you guys both so much. I'm thrilled with all the people who are willing to talk, and I believe that a lot of people will benefit from your story and from Kathy and Sean's responses, and those are good examples of the way it should be.
Kathy, thank you for being a guest and supporting Karen. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciated meeting you. And Karen, thank you so much for offering to share your story today. I think that your willingness to share this personal experience will help a lot of people as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
We hoped you liked this episode, and if you did, please give it a 5-star review on iTunes, Google Play, and Podbean. If you want to get in touch with Christina or me, you can find us at sexliesandthetruth.com. I'm Jody Klugman-Rabb. Thanks for listening.